May I have your attention, please? Shabbat Shalom, everyone. My name is Sonny Yisrayl Benjamin Alexander Hawkins, and I would like to serve you forever as a priest starting very soon. It's now time to start finding your seats for Sabbath services.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. My name is Yisrayl Hawkins, and I would like to serve you forever as a priest starting very soon. I would now like to introduce to you the sons and daughters of Yisrael now entering the sanctuary. I will now turn it over to the queens of the house of Yahweh.
Oh Yahweh, we will rejoice. First thing in the morning, ask Yahweh to guide your way, to be a blessing to others, to put on the face of Father Yahweh. Merciful, compassionate, abounding in righteousness, to guard and keep your way. So we look to Yisrayl Hawkins, the one sent by you in these last days. Prophesy to gather a remnant of people and teach them to walk in your ways. The high priest and the branch prophesy to take a stance against all works of darkness. In these last days, behold the face of Yahweh. Hallelujah. He will branch out from his place. He will build the house of Yahweh. He will bear glory and sit on his throne. The council of peace will be between them both. The high priest and the branch, shepherds of Yahweh's great plan, Yeshua and Yisrael. The gates of hell will not prevail. Merciful, compassionate, abounding in righteousness, to guard and keep your way. He will branch out from his place. He will build the house of Yahweh. He will bear glory and sit on his throne. The council of peace will be between them both. Yeshua and Yisrael. The gates of hell will not prevail. The high priest and the branch, shepherds of Yahweh's great land. Yahweh, rejoice, rejoice, rejoice. seek peace within that way. Couple with love for the neighbor. We see the face of great Yahweh. Of your great commandments, we seek peace within that way. Couple with love for the neighbor. We see the face of great Yahweh. Yahweh, we love your great commandments. We seek peace within that way. Couple with love for the neighbor. We see the face of great Yahweh. Yahweh, we love your great commandments. We seek peace within that way. Couple with love for the neighbor. We see the face of great Yahweh.
Brothers and sisters, at this time we'll turn the services over to the great son of Israel Abel, Deacon Yisrayl Hawkins.
Shalom, everyone. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. You may be seated. My title today is Overcoming Sin and Putting Away God Worship and Rejoice. Today I will show you that you can overcome and put away sin and rejoice. Overcoming the student's handbook means to get better. It means to get the better of, prevail, to win the ways to the kingdom. In the 12th book of Israel, chapter 15, verse 79, in the morning. Don't miss the morning. Don't miss the afternoon either. It's really great. And then in the morning, we're going to continue this and show Yahshua's government that you have to be a part of. You're almost to the finishing line, running this race. This is the race. The only race of people is the race they run to get into the kingdom. They are all equal in Yahweh's eyes. Everyone and given the same opportunity, except Yahweh has chosen a special group. Not because of your righteousness. He probably took you out of the worst sins in the world. You were probably the worst. The worst was there. Or sins in the world. You were probably the worst. The worst was there. And if he hadn't pulled you out and he took you and said this, if this is yours, if you want to partake of it, or if you refuse these blessings, just as justice was taken from Yeshua, who paid for the wickedness of mankind. Overcome also means to conquer. We must conquer sin if we want to be perfect. Now turn over to 1 Corinthians 9, verse 26. And it says, therefore I do not run like a man running aimlessly. I do not fight like the man who beats the air. Overcome also means to conquer. We must conquer sin if we want to be perfect. Turn to Ephesians 6, verse 11 through 17. And it says, "Put on the whole armor of Yahweh, that you may be able to stand against the willies, crafty ways, schemes of the devil. For we wrestle not only against flesh but blood, but also against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of the world, against spiritual forces of the evil one in the heaven. Therefore take up the whole armor of Yahweh, that you may be able to withstand in the evil day, and having overcome all to stand. Stand therefore, having your waist belted with the truth, having put on your breastplate of righteousness, and having shod with the feet of your preparation of the message of peace. Above all, taking the shield of the faith, with which you will be able to quench all the fiery darts of the wicked one, and take the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of the laws and the prophets." Here are the 6 steps. Stand with your waist belted with the truth. Number 2, breastplate of righteousness. Number 3, shod feet with the message of peace. Number 4, helmet of salvation. And number 5, shield of faith. The law of rejoicing is found in Deuteronomy 16, verse 14. Turn there. And it says, "And you shall rejoice at the feast, you and your wives, your son and your daughter, your manservant and your maidservant, the Levite, the stranger, and the fatherless, and the widows in your city." And if you all please stand, I'll turn it over to the next speaker.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. You may be seated. Peace be with each and every one of you. Today we're going to talk about rejoicing, something we've heard, all feasts long. That's the theme of the feast, rejoicing. And how we have to learn to rejoice. But today we're going to talk about, what is rejoicing and what should we rejoice in? Okay, because like pastors talked about before, and many of the speakers have talked about, we can rejoice either in righteousness or we can rejoice in evil and stupidity. Okay, but by now we should all know it's a law, to rejoice. I went over that a lot. Go and turn over to Deuteronomy. It's on the banner as well. It's the scripture, Deuteronomy 16 and verse 14. It says, "And you shall rejoice at your feast, and you shall rejoice at the feast, you, your wives, your sons, and your daughter, your manservant, your maidservant, the Levite, and the stranger, and the fatherless, the widow, and the widows in your cities." And then it says 7 days you shall keep a joyous feast, the Yahweh your Father, the place he will choose. Okay, but it's very important that rejoicing. Okay, it's a law to rejoice. Now, but what should we rejoice about? Okay, there's many examples in scriptures, especially in Proverbs. Go and turn over to Proverbs 24. Proverbs 24. So what we shouldn't rejoice about. Proverbs 24 and verse 17. Okay, it says, "Do not rejoice when your enemy falls." Okay, do not rejoice, whenever someone's, hurt or there's a problem going on. "Do not rejoice whenever your enemy falls, or let your heart be glad when he stumbles." If you look at Proverbs 2:10 through 15, and these are the people we shouldn't be like. Proverbs 2, look at verse 10. It's talking about wisdom. It says, "When wisdom enters your mind, knowledge is pleasant to your being. Discretion will protect you, and understanding will guard you." says, verse 13 says, verse 12 it says, to deliver you from the way of evil, from the man who speaks forward perverse and deceitful things. Okay, these are the people we shouldn't be like. From those who leave the paths of uprightness to walk in the ways of darkness, who find joy, who rejoice. They find this joy, this amusement in those in doing evil. Okay, they find their joy in doing evil, and who find delight in the forwardness, perversity, and deceitfulness of the wicked. Okay, and goes on to talk more about them. And problem. These are the people we shouldn't be like. We shouldn't rejoice or find our joy, in evil and in the breaking the laws of Yahweh. Now, this is what we should rejoice in. Okay, if you go and turn over to Philippians 1, and it's verse 25. Yeah, 25. And this is the Apostle Shaul. He wrote a letter to the Philippians. Okay, and verse 25, he's talking about to live in Messiah, to live as Messiah, to die as gains, the title of it. Verse 25, it says, and having this confidence, and I know that I will remain and continue with you for the advancement of the joy in the faith. Okay, in order that your rejoicing may become more abundant in Yahshua Messiah through my coming to you again. Okay, so he's trying to exhort, these Philippians, the believers, in here, and he's saying, in order that your rejoicing might be in Yahshua Messiah. Okay, it might become more abundant in Yahshua Messiah. In the righteousness, and these things, not evil. If you go to Romans, turn over to Romans 5:11. Okay, it says, and not only this, but we also rejoice in Yahweh, through our King Yahshua Messiah, for whom we have now received reconciliation or atonement. Okay, and it says, this is the title of salvation from Yahweh through His Son Yahshua Messiah. He says we rejoice in Yahweh. Okay, we rejoice in Yahweh and His righteousness, and that's what we should rejoice in. We should rejoice in the teachings, and the things that are brought out. Here, at the house of Yahweh from, the prophecy films and the information that we're receiving. If you look over to 1 Thessalonians. 1 Thessalonians and 1 Thessalonians 5, verse 14. And this is a very important scripture. Okay, and if everyone could get this, these points down, we'd have less problems, in the house of Yahweh. And, even if the world could get this down, there'd be a lot less problems too. If you look at verse 14, it says, now we exhort you, brethren, to warn those who are unruly, not keeping in ranks or out of order. Among you, comfort the downhearted, support the weak, and be patient towards all. Okay, and the great Khan Kifu was talking about this patience as well, and how important this is. See that no one pays back evil for evil to any. Okay, the retaliation, but always pursue what is righteous, both among yourselves and towards all. Then rejoice always. Okay, verse 16. Rejoice always. Pray without ceasing. In everything giving thanks, for this is the will of Yahweh in Yahshua Messiah for you. Okay? Do not quench the spirit, do not neglect prophecies, prove all things, and hold fast to that which is righteous. And the last one, abstain from from every appearance of evil. Okay, if we can just get these things down, it would solve a lot of the problems we have. If everyone could follow what's said there. There wouldn't be any bitterness, or arguing or contention and strife, because everyone would be rejoicing. There would be no retaliation, because no one would be paying back evil for evil. And we would be pursuing everything that is righteous. Okay, there wouldn't be any sin, because we would abstain from every appearance of sin. There wouldn't even be the appearance of sin. Okay, now everyone's seen the new banner Okay, new banner. Everyone should have seen it. If you haven't seen it yet, go take time to look at it. But the new banner, okay, it says rejoice. It has that scripture, Deuteronomy 16:14. Says, now the banner, it says, you shall rejoice, it's the exact words, you shall rejoice, and you shall rejoice at your feast. You and your wives, your son, your daughter, your manservant, your maidservant, the Levite, the stranger and the fatherless, and the widows in your cities. Okay? Now, if you put that into gematria, okay? Put it into gematria calculator. The only number that's usable, the other ones are too big. The only number that's usable is the number 2004. Okay? 2004. Now, number 2004 means to command. Okay? To command, command appropriately, or orders things, assigns, puts them toward the parts fit together. And it's that unity. That unity that, Pastor is trying to instill in the house of Yahweh. So everything fits together. Everything works perfectly. And the last one here, command. Okay? It says command, commanded, and commands. Okay? Now, in the first book of Yisrayl, okay, got this from Yisrayl, says, in the first book of Yisrayl, chapter 16, if you look at verse 3, it says, don't forget to rejoice at the feast, because it is a command. Okay, it's not just a request. Of course, you should be rejoicing in Yahweh now. What I mean by rejoicing with your brothers and sisters in Yahweh is getting things right according to His law, and rejoicing because you have. Okay, but remember what he says there. Okay, rejoice. Don't forget to rejoice at the feast, because it is command. Okay, it's not just a request. Okay, so it's all the time I have, but we need to be working hard for this unity. Working hard to strive for unity and peace. Here's the new banner. It's the picture of it. Okay, and you shall rejoice. Okay, so everyone, take that time. Try to be a blessing to others. Try to help others rejoice. Make their feast a great feast. If everyone please stand. I have a great privilege and honor to turn it over to Great Khan Yisrayl Hawkins.
Shabbat Shalom. You may be seated. Please be turning over. We're going to start today in Deuteronomy 16. Deuteronomy 16:16. Here it says, 3 times a year, all your males, and before you think it's just the males, remember verse 14, and you shall rejoice at your feast, you and your wife and wives and sons and daughters and manservants and maidservants and so forth. So it's the whole family. It's a family feast. But back to 16, shall appear in front of Yahweh your Father at the place He will choose, at the Feast of Unleavened Bread, at the Feast of Weeks, and at the Feast of Tabernacles. And they must not appear in front of Yahweh empty-handed. All right? Every person shall give as they are capable of giving, in proportion to the blessing Yahweh your Father has given you. Be turning over to Exodus 18. So don't forget, you come to Yahweh's house, as Deuteronomy 12 says, and there you shall bring your tithes and your offerings and your special gifts to Yahweh. Please, brothers and sisters, don't forget this feast. Don't come before Yahweh empty-handed. And Exodus 18, verse 20. And here's the job that pastor's been given. And you shall teach them the ordinances and the laws, and shall show them the way in which they must walk, the way in which they must walk, and the work that they must do. This work of Yahweh is not just on our pastor's shoulders. It's on each and every one that Yahweh calls out to contribute to this work. All right, to support the work with our tithes and our offerings. Please, we desperately need everyone in here to do their part in supporting this work. Don't hold back your tithes. Yahweh said if you do, He calls us a thief and a robber. Do you think He's going to let us in, a bunch of thieves and robbers, into His kingdom? And before that, even protect us from nuclear war? So don't neglect these things. But we're going to talk today about the way that we must walk. Turn over to Romans 12. We're going to have to move quickly. Romans 12 and verse 1. Therefore I appeal to you, brothers, by the mercies of Yahweh, that you present your bodies as living sacrifices, just like Yahshua did. Why was Yahshua's sacrifice acceptable? What made Yahshua's sacrifice acceptable of His own self? It's because He was sinless. He never sinned. Now, we can't say that, but we can say that we have stopped breaking Yahweh's laws, can we not? And this will make us holy and acceptable to Yahweh, which is our reasonable service. We owe this to Yahweh. And do not be conformed to the pattern of this world. Yes, the world has many patterns that we don't need to partake of. We're to be transformed by the renewing of our mind so that we have a sound mind, that we may be able to test and prove that so when some other thing is presented to us, some act of stupidity, some idiot on the internet tries to tell you something that contradicts the house of Yahweh, you'll know what the difference is between what's righteous and acceptable in the perfect will of Yahweh and what is so much fertilizer. But not until we stop sinning and getting away from the pattern of this world. Turn over to Genesis 24. You know, we have a pattern of this world, and Yahweh put it there, as we talked about before, the carnal mind ingrained in stupidity, ingrained in sin, that we have to overcome. And the things that come natural, and the way our parents did things, you know, our worldly parents, our worldly kin, and way things have gone for generations are stuck in us that we're getting rid of right now. So Abraham was old, verse 1, and well advanced in age, and Yahweh blessed Abraham in every way. Abraham was the overseer over the work. Abraham had a work of Yahweh. This is what's left out. You know, the way the King James is written, so much detail is left out because it's here a little, there a little, so that they can learn it easier. No, so it's hidden from the world. They don't see it. You can't find it in worldly books. You can't find it in encyclopedias even. Commentaries, rather. It's all hidden. So Abraham said to the chief servant of his house, you know, put your hand under my thigh, that is, make a vow. I want you to, I want you to vow to Yahweh that you will not take a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites, the unconverted, God worshippers, among whom I live in the midst of. See, Abraham was in the same situation we are. He says, but go to my country, and gave him the instructions. But look at verse 6. Abraham said to him, be sure that you do not take my son back there. Well, if Abraham didn't want Isaac to go back to the world, how much less should we go back to the world hunting these things? Yahweh commands us to come out of her, my people. Turn over to 2 Corinthians 6. Because although you don't know it, what Abraham followed, and you're not going to get it just by reading that chapter in the King James or even the way we have it now, because details are left out and time is compressed in these scriptures. But in 2 Corinthians 6, Yahweh tells us in no uncertain terms, in verse 14, do not be unequally yoked together with unbelievers. For what fellowship does righteousness have with unrighteousness? And what fellowship does light have with darkness? What harmony can there be between Messiah and Satan? And what share does a believer have with an infidel, an unconverted? All right, so he's telling us, come out. And Abraham said the same thing. Shaul is only expounding on what was written there in Genesis. Abraham is saying the same thing. Don't go back there. Don't take my son back to the unclean, unbelieving world and try to seduce a man or woman, because a female can do this just as easily as a man. Seduce a man or woman to try to come to the house of Yahweh based on a promise that you'll marry them. All right? This being unequally yoked, it's trespassing and fornication to start a relationship with someone of the opposite gender unless it's through the counselors. Simple fact. He calls it God worship. Look at verse 16. What agreement does the house of Yahweh have with gods? Brothers and sisters, it's God worship to meet a person on the internet and try to start a relationship with them. Plain and simple. God worship, an unbeliever, unconverted. And look at 1 Corinthians 6. Because this is what you're also guilty of, man or woman. Verse 15. Do you not know that your bodies are members of Messiah? Would I take the members of Messiah and make them members of a prostitute? Yes, and every worldly man or woman out there is a prostitute. They've sold themselves to Satan. They prostituted themselves to the gods. Is this going to be allowed by Yahweh? No way, brothers and sisters. No way. If they come to the house because Yahweh calls them here, not because you dragged them here, because Yahweh calls them here, and they convert over a period of time, going through counseling, maybe even a year, and show that they love Yahweh more than all else, more than any man, that they're not here for a man or a woman, anyone specific, and they're here for Yahweh, well then they can start the process of counseling. All right? This word yoked means associate discordantly. There's no agreement between an unconverted person, and we can't convert them on our own. You can't convert a person over the internet. That takes years in counseling to do, at least a year. And then that word comes from the word coupling, law or obligation, marriage. They have to prove they're converted first, brethren. Now, this servant was not the butler, this chief servant. Abraham had a work of Yahweh, like we said. This was a priest of Yahweh. And he didn't go there by himself to talk to a woman. There was Kohanas and judges involved in this, just like there is in the house of Yahweh. And this is how it was done. And we'll get more later, we'll be able to get in more detail on that whole chapter. But I want you to understand the pattern, okay? The women, remember in Exodus 38, refers to the women that served at the tent of meeting. They weren't just passing out drinks or something or looking pretty. They were out there ministering, counseling, and yes, they passed out food and drinks. That's not all, though. They passed out the spiritual food. They taught the women. They counseled them, got them ready for these various offices and so forth. But without pastor, we wouldn't understand any of this. We wouldn't understand to hear a little, there a little, of the scriptures. And we would be off doing things the way the world does. If you meet them on Facebook or internet dating service, that right tells you they're not seeking Yahweh. They're not seeking Yahweh first. Is Yahweh found on an internet dating site? No, they're seeking a mate. Or maybe a way out of a bad situation. You have no idea. But then once they're hooked, it's, oh, by the way, did I tell you about the house of Yahweh? Yeah, you're going to have to get baptized before we get married. Oh, okay. Yeah, no problem. I'll do whatever they tell me to do. You know, they're willing to say or do anything just to keep the relationship going. That's not what Abraham did for Isaac, brothers and sisters. Are we crazy? Are we going to just throw away the whole scriptures on these items and not take the correction of Yahweh? Do we have that little trust in Yahweh and the promise of His kingdom? You know, I think more time needs to be put into the other Facebook. You know, get face in book. You know, there's a way to achieve a mate, a righteous spouse in the house of Yahweh. And it's done, but it takes time. But I'll tell you, the internet is our worst enemy. And unless you're on the internet seeing the message of Yahweh, everything you see there you can basically throw out. Unless it's something that the house of Yahweh here has brought you. If pastor hasn't brought it, leave it alone. It's only getting your minds off the studies. If you got that much time on your hands, start with hand copying the book of Yahweh. That would be a great start. But if you're interested in a mate, in a husband or wife, come to the North office and turn your name in. And then wait on Yahweh. Yahweh will choose something of wife or husband, someone suitable for you. Yahweh will do the choosing. All right? You don't go out and make that choice yourself. Isaac certainly didn't. He let the servant do it for him. Then all communication is done through the counselors, not between the two people initially. So, and this goes, I don't care how old we are, what office we have, anything done outside of this counseling, brothers and sisters, is complete God worship, and we need to stop it. As Yochanan said in 1 Yochanan 5:21, flee God worship. Flee it. Run away from it as fast as you can. With this, if everyone will please stand. It's now my great honor and privilege to turn the services over to the great Kohan Benjamin Hawkins.
Shabbat Shalom. Great saints, you may be seated. And may the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. Let's turn over to Yochanan chapter 7. Yochanan 7. To get started here. We have a lot to cover, so be ready. Yochanan 7:37 on page 823. Subtitle says, Yeshua's message on the last great day, the people's reaction. And we're just going to read 37 and 38. On the last day, the last great day of the Feast of Tabernacles, Yisrayl Hawkins stood and cried, if any man thirsts, let him come to me and drink. He who believes in me, as the scripture has said, out of his heart shall flow rivers of living water. The reason we're reading that today is we're going to make it crystal clear who this is speaking, who Yahshua is working with in these last days, if we haven't already. Here's the gematria of that verse. Word for word. The first number is too long. It's too many letters, so I'm just going to go to the second. 8268. Let's start with that. 8268. It means a trough, a watering trough. A watering place. A watering place. You know, like a well where you go to the drink from? Remember the well of salvation, the house of Yahweh? It's from 8248, and it means cause to drink water, give to drink. Oh, what a coincidence, right? It means give drink, and it means waters. And it means cause to drink water, give to drink. And that's number 8268. Now let's go to the second number. 1378. 1378 in Strong's Greek means a law, a decree or ordinance. The laws, the rules and requirements of the laws of Moshe. The doctrines of the house of Yahweh, okay? And it also means of certain decrees of the apostles relative to righteous living. Righteous living. Write this down. It's from 1380, and it's from the base of 1166, and it means to show, to give evidence, proof of a thing, to show by words or teach. So you just saw two meanings, water, okay, water, and to show, and the doctrines of the house of Yahweh, okay? That should remind you, here, first of all, before we go there, here's 1378 in the Hebrew. Wow, crystal. Now turn over to Revelation 22 based on all those meanings right there. Turn over to Revelation chapter 22. And let's look at verse 1. It says, "And he showed me a pure river of the water of life, clear as crystal, proceeding from the throne of Yahweh and of the Lamb." Okay? And who's the Lamb working with in these last days? The Council of Peace is between who? It's between Yisrayl Hawkins and Yahshua Messiah. Okay? Now, if that's not enough, I'll just show you. Here's the gematria. I've never shown this before. Tethering his donkey colt to the choicest branch. And we're only going to look at that first number, the Jewish gematria, 1808. And lo and behold, it means branch. Branch. Who's the branch, people? Who's the branch? Spoken of in Zechariah 6:11 through 13. And it also means to draw. Notice from 1802, to draw out, to let down like a bucket, you know, like into that well of salvation, right? To let down that bucket into the well. Turn over to Matithia chapter 21. Matithia chapter 21, because there's a group that Yahshua spoke about in these last days, and I'm going to make it crystal clear today. Yahweh's going to make it crystal clear who these people are. They're sitting right in front of me, and they're scattered throughout the earth right now, those that are joined together with this work. Matithia 21:43 says, "Therefore I say to you, the kingdom of Yahweh will be taken from you and given to a people of the same habit, that from a foreign land, and they will bring forth the fruits of it." Okay? Now 21:43, that's the verse we're reading out of. It means remembrance or memorial. Remember, Yahweh's memorial is his name. Okay, Exodus 3:14. It's from 21:42, and it means remember. It's the word zakar. Turn over to Zechariah right now, chapter 6, on page 719, and we're going to read verse 14. Page 719, it says, "And the crowns will be for Heldai, to Tobiah, and to Yedaiah, and to Yeshaiah, the son of Zephaniah, as a sign of honor, and as a zakar." Zakar, there's that word right there. As a zakar, a memorial, a remembrance in the house of Yahweh. Now, talking about these crowns, look at the side note. We're going to be looking at side note in. It says, crowns will be to the strong. Okay, crowns will be to the strong, the righteous ones who know Yahweh, the precious sons protected as an honor and as a remembering, the memorial in the house of Yahweh. And side note, the strong and precious. The strong and precious. Okay, Yahweh's precious jewels in his crown. Okay, now 2143 we just read from, Matithya 2143 in the Greek. It means beauty and comeliness. Beauty and comeliness. Keep those words in your mind right there for later, okay? But write them down. You know, I talked about that chicken coop that this great house began in a few weeks ago. You know, that last days first mobile sanctuary in 1980. Y'all remember that? Did you know that in the Gematria, the Jewish Hebrew Gematria 2022 actually means mountain? The mountain. It's the same word used right here. Used right here in Isaiah 2. The promotion of the house of Yahweh. That's where it began. Okay, at that dedication of the first mobile sanctuary, okay, and the dedication that pastor and his brother did on at the homestead there. Here's Strong's 2106 in the Greek, and it means in the sense of prominence. Prominence, you know, like being promoted and being crystal clear. You know, what's that word I'm looking for? Conspicuous. Yes, great. We're learning. That's awesome. That's awesome. It also means cornerstone. And remember, Yeshua is the cornerstone. It's from 2099. It means to be prominent, and it means brightness. And that's this is the Gematria here on the last day's first mobile sanctuary. Okay? It's amazing, is it not? Turn over to Psalm 91. Psalm 91, because all of us want to be protected, right? We're in the protected place, correct? We all want protection? Well, you know, it's not just protection from nuclear war, but it's also protection from sickness, disease, the things that the great Khan Shaul just spoke about, you know, protection from making bad choices. You know, you go to your counselors, you get the information before you make a decision, not after you make the decision. You know, all those things come into play. Psalm 91, look at the subtitle under 91. It says, under your shadow, O Yahweh. Well, who's that shadow? Here we go. Under your shadow, O Yahweh, is 3484. And by the way, I thought it was interesting. It's also the Gematria for is willing to take whatever it takes and love and respect yourself and one another, then teach others to do the same. It's the same number, 3484. Well, what could it mean? Well, what could it mean? Well, it means Yeshurun. It means Yeshurun, you know, Yahweh's upright one. You know, who's Yeshurun? That's right, Yisrayl. Because notice here it says it's a poetic name for Israel, the upright one, Yeshurun. Yeshurun, a symbol or a name for Yisrael. Okay, just like it shows us in Isaiah 44:2. So if you're wondering where you need to become, you know, for that protection, you need to get under Yeshurun. That's who we need to be under, okay? Because he's working with our high priest, who's high priest over the house of Yahweh, and then they're connected with Yahweh, okay? So you're in the right place. It's from 3474. Remember, these are pastors' birthday and lot number. It means to be smooth, straight, or right. It means to be agreeable, to be pleasing, right, smooth, straight, and esteem right. To be pleasing, it also means to do righteously. That's what we're all shooting for, right? Okay. I don't want to run out of time on this, so I'm going to have to skip this part, but I don't want to, but you know, sometimes you got to make the adjustments, okay? But we got to get to this. All right, now let's turn over to Isaiah chapter 4. Isaiah 4. Isaiah 4. And let's look at verse 2. On page 532, it says, In that day will the branch of Yahweh be beautiful, brought to prominence and glorious, promoted to honor. And the fruit of the earth will be excellent and comely for those who are escaped to Israel. Well, no, this isn't talking about flying to the Middle East. Don't go flying into the frying pan. Okay? You're under Israel right here, Yeshurun. This is where you need to be, right here. Okay? Through prophecy. Okay, now, with that in your mind, with this in your mind, and I go up also to, let's read through this. And it will come to pass that he who is left in Zion, remember the 613 laws of Yahweh, and he who remains in Jerusalem, the city of the priests that teaches peace, will be called holy, everyone who is written among the living in Jerusalem. When Yahweh has washed away the filth of the daughters of Zion and purged the blood from the midst of Jerusalem by the spirit of judgment and by the spirit of burning, Yahweh will create over every dwelling place of Mount Zion, over those whom he gathers there, a cloud and smoke by day and the shining of a flaming fire by night. For over all their glory Yahweh will create a defense, because there, at the house of Yahweh, will be the tabernacle, the house of Yahweh, where the 613 laws are kept. For her shadow, defense from things to come in that day, from the heat, the drought, the desolation, the utter waste, for a place of refuge and for a covert, shelter from the storm and from the rain. Now turn over to Exodus 34, because today's what day? It's the 13th, right? Now, I got to set you up for this, because about a month before this feast, Pastor called me and he said, did you notice the dates of the feast? And I told him, of course, no, I hadn't really looked at that. He says, go look at it. He says that first number 6 represents death and destruction. The way of mankind. It's mankind's number. But he said 13 is the 13 attributes of Yahweh. So that, the inspiration always comes from Yisrayl Hawkins, okay? Who's working with, I think he has a telephone line directly with Yahshua. I think these two are like sitting on the phone all day talking or something. I don't know how he does it, but I know he's doing it, okay? Prophecy says he is. All right, so Exodus 34, let's look at the 13 attributes real quick. Exodus 34, to the side. Look to the side. It says, Almighty, merciful, compassionate, long-suffering, abounding, possessing righteousness and truth, keeping mercy, forgiving, punishes sin, Heavenly Father, making the covenant with His, doing marvels, awesome, and you can turn that jealous to zealous, because that's what I did for the gematria. That's what we've been taught. It means zeal. It means zealous. Here's the gematria. The first two numbers are too long. They're 5 digits, so I'm skipping those. Okay, you see that? I'm only going to go to this one right here. And I put it word for word, and the only thing I change is right there. I changed it from jealous to zealous, okay? And it's word number, look at it again, 2156. Everybody write that down, please. All right, are you ready? Are we going to make it crystal clear now? 2156 in the Hebrew means branch. Branch. And it means branch, vine branches. And it's from the Hebrew word zamar, and it means to prune. To trim and to prune. And that's what Yahshua said in Yachanan 15. He prunes this tree and he casts away those branches that are not producing fruit, right? But Yahshua, or the prophets, promised that this branch would become glorious, right? Promoted to honor, beautiful, comely. Remember all those words, because here's the definition of Greek 2156. It means becomingly, decently, modest and noble, having good or righteous form. Form. Remember squeezing, forming, shaping? It's from this Greek word here. Oh my word, look at that. Comely and honorable, the same exact things. Branch, comely, honorable, and that was found where? In Isaiah 4:2, right? It means of honorable position. well-fashioned, desirable. Notice, being winsome, encouraging to others, which attracts attention in a positive way, which properly uses influence, especially by serving in a high respected position. It means appropriate. It means presentable. It means prominence. Remember, he said it will be brought to prominence, right? It means bearing oneself becomingly in speech or behavior. Remember, isn't that something about modest? In decency, remember being decent in the way we speak, the way we behave, the way we dress, the way we communicate with one another, right? Decency. It means speaking of morals, building moral excellence. Isn't that what Yeshurun has taught us? The upright one, the straight one, the smooth one? Yes, he is. He's smooth. Okay, he is a smooth man. And that word smooth actually goes to that smooth stone that has his lot number on it. One day I'll maybe get to that. It means honorable, respectable, well-formed, noble in rank, comely and honorable. Now, is that not just amazing, house of Yahweh? Those are Yahweh's 13 attributes. And remember, the fruits that we're going to be bringing forth is people. We need to watch our conduct, house of Yahweh. Now, I want to also tell you, I'm going to plug this sermon again. Go back and read 4:1809 and 5:30, the sermon from 5:30:09, which was just a few weeks later, because guess what? Pastor wrote about this word for word right here. In that same sermon about the branch of the donkey, right here, in that day will the branch of Yahweh be beautiful, and the fruit of the earth will be excellent. That is, the fruit that comes from the teachings of the house of Yahweh. Yes, they will repent. They will convert to Yahweh's laws, making them excellent and comely. Let's give Yahweh a big round of applause. It has been a great privilege and honor to speak to you today on the last great day of the feast. Remember, Yahweh is crying out, Yahshua is crying out, Pastor is crying out, come and drink at the house of Yahweh. So at this time, I'd like to turn it over to the great Kohan. Everybody stand, please. I'd like to turn it over now to the great Kohan Yehuda Hawkins.
Shalom. Please be seated. I don't know if my prayers are getting heard, but I prayed to Yahweh he'd turn the clock and start going backwards so I'd have more time. Turn to page 22. We're going to look at the law again because there's an important tie-in to this law we talked about the other day. Then Yitzhak called Jacob and blessed him and charged him and said to him, you shall not take a wife from the daughters of Canaan. And remember, the word Canaanite means a merchant who deceives with deceptive balances, or one who makes a lie look like the truth. Arise, go to Padan Aram and get to the house of Bethuel. That's the house of Yahweh, by the way. And take yourself a wife from there. And so it goes. We told you this is a law of Yahweh. You don't go 6,000 miles across the ocean to get a wife. You don't go to a Roman Catholic country or a Protestant country or a Russian Orthodox country. Oh yes, you have those on the internet too. Look at your new Russian bride. The point of the matter is, the law of Yahweh tells you not to do this. And that's why we're telling you how to do it right. You can do it right or you can do it wrong. But when you don't keep a law of Yahweh, you break another law as well as the law you broke here. Doesn't the law tell you The first two laws are to love Yahweh and to love your neighbors yourself. If you love Yahweh, you believe in Him, don't you? When you go break a law like this and run off somewhere and get a wife from a country that's almost 100% Roman Catholic, or Russian Orthodox, or maybe even Buddhist, atheist, whatever, you don't have any faith in Yahweh. That's as simple as that. And if you don't have faith in Yahweh, Yahweh has this to say to you. Turn to Isaiah 44, verse 24. Isaiah 44, verse 24. Because this scripture, correctly translated, tells you something that Yahweh wants you to know. It's on page 558. Most Bibles say it this way. This is what Yahweh, your Redeemer, He who formed you from the womb, says. I am Yahweh, who makes all things, who stretched out the heavens together with my servants, who spread out the earth with me. The words together with my servants that are written in Isaiah 44:24 are translated from the Hebrew word mati. This word is listed on page 92 of volume 4 of the New International Version, Interlinear Hebrew English Old Testament, John Kohlenberger III, which shows this word was added to the original Hebrew manuscript of this verse. And it was originally written in order to explain something or to show how to pronounce a certain word. But this word is not an actual part of the original Hebrew of Isaiah 44:24, and so pay no attention to it. The words with me that are written in Isaiah 44:24 are translated from the Hebrew word mi'ati. They're two words. The Hebrew word me that is written in Isaiah 44:24 is listed on page 483 of the Analytical Hebrew and Chaldee Lexicon by Benjamin Davidson, which shows this word is an interrogative. Does anybody know what the word interrogative means? It asks a question. The word ati that is written in Isaiah 44:24 is listed on page 54 of the Analytical Hebrew and Chaldee Lexicon by Benjamin Davidson, which shows this word means with me, in company with me. So this scripture is saying, remember, when you're breaking a law like Genesis 28:1 and 2, it shows you don't have faith in Yahweh. You believe in Him, or you love Him like it says you believe in Him. But this is what the scripture is actually saying. This is what Yahweh, your Redeemer, He who formed you from the womb, says. I am Yahweh who makes all things, who stretched out the heavens alone, who spread out the earth myself. I ask you, who was with me when I did this? Were you with Him? Was the Lord God with Him? Was Buddha with Him? Was Krishna and the others with Him? Who was with me when I did all these things? Why can't you trust me? Why can't you believe in me? Why can't you believe in the people I told to come to tell you the right way, including the one sent? And Yahweh's asking you these questions, every one of you. What I mean is, I'm not accusing anybody of being a real mean person. I'm simply trying to say, He's trying to let you know. He's not trying, He's doing it. He's letting you know He's there for you. And that's what it's all about. Now, I'm running out of time, and I did get to, believe it or not, I got to the final point anyway, so all's well. But I want you to understand something. Trust Yahweh. Who are you? Were you there when He created the worlds? Even Satan wasn't allowed to be around. But trust in Yahweh. And whatever you have to give up, you can bet it'll be at least 100 times better whatever you get in return. May Yahweh bless your understanding, and I turn the services over to the great Kohan, Yisrayl Hawkins. I'm leaving.
Here you go.
My king. Yes.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone, and may all be seated. Welcome to the house of Yahweh, where you get the real news, not fake news. How do you know the news is real that's brought forth from the house of Yahweh? It fulfills prophecy, absolutely. That's why it's real. Yahweh said it was going to come to pass. From the beginning, He declared the end, as Isaiah said. Now, moving on into the news, something inspirational that all of us need to watch, because we as a community are going to have to come together to actually prepare for a multitude of people. And we show some news that came out of Puerto Rico, how they went from doing nothing to serving thousands of people food. They went from 5,000 meals to 8,000 meals to 25,000 meals, looking to go to 50,000 meals. All of that escalation within 6 days. And watch how they do it, and they're working together. And one interesting thing, the man says, everybody comes to work. Nobody talks, they're just working. And it shows the necessity and the urgency. Well, we see that because with what the news is bringing forth and the rest of it, remember, Pastor said the United States would stay strong unto the end. Remember what he's brought about the petrodollar. The United States has built its armed forces, and all of the things we see in this kind of leader of the world, as they call it, on the petrodollar. Well, the United States is now watching Saudi Arabia and OPEC all leave the petrodollar. They're being courted right now. Saudi Arabia, remember, they just signed a deal with Russia. They signed an economic deal which would control the outflow of oil. Remember, Saudi Arabia and Russia are the two largest producers or exporters of oil. And then you have, along with that, they signed an arms deal with Russia. Saudi Arabia signed it with Russia. Now, how strange is that, since Saudi Arabia just signed a 10-year deal with the United States last year? Why would they need more arms, and why did they need them from Russia? Well, China is trying to get Saudi Arabia, and they're doing very well, because remember, China has $3.2 trillion on-hand cash to work with. They're not in debt. They don't owe anyone. They have on-hand cash. The second richest country in the world is Saudi Arabia. They have $686 billion. Saudi Arabia, though, has become addicted to spending, and they now spend more than they bring in. They're looking at going bankrupt by 2020. They don't want to stop spending, so they want to rejuvenate their oil, their business. They want to diversify their oil. Well, China, remember, Saudi Arabia just signed that deal with Russia. We'll control output. That'll bring the prices up. And China is saying, if you trade in our currency, you can convert it to gold, and we're going to open up many things, because we're going to build roads in countries there are no roads. We're going to build infrastructure. We're going to bring you customers you've never had before. You will not need the United States any longer. You follow us. Now, OPEC has said if Saudi Arabia leaves, all the rest of them are going to follow, and you will see the petrodollar crash. Remember, that will bring down the United States drastically. Pastors told us to plan for years, and I hope we've all taken that seriously, and we've planned and we've put forth effort, because when the United States, when they fall, that's the end. There is no more. There is no more, because it said the chief nation of all nations. Now, Russia, Iran, and Turkey, they've actually recently signed the last few months, and that's going to be implemented. They're already implementing parts of it to actually bring de-escalation to Syria. Now, Turkey, remember, Turkey was wanting Assad removed. That's the president of Syria. They wanted him removed, and they wanted the United States, and they were behind the United States in pushing against this anti-Assad government. Turkey's not doing that anymore. Now you have NATO allies that are actually coming against each other. Turkey is actually coming against the United States. Russia is who they're teaming up with. They're not supposed to do that if you're a NATO ally. I want to show you really quickly. The city that's going to be talked about is Idlib. If you notice, it's not far from Aleppo. That's the major city that was supposedly just liberated here not long ago. Well, they flushed them all to Idlib, and what they're saying is these people are backed by the American government. That's who's giving them the weapons. They're calling it Operation Euphrates Shield. That's the back part of it. Notice this is the Euphrates River. All of this taking place, forms of coalitions. And the interesting thing that Syria, Iran, and Syria, Iran, and Russia are saying about Turkey, we're doing this to see how much we can trust them. They want to see if they will help push out what America, the United States, has put into Syria. So they're trying to build trust with this to see if they're actually going to turn on the United States. Well, in pushing that out, remember, in and around the great river Euphrates, well, what else is taking place? Well, Turkey and the United States are now openly arguing. They're openly arguing. They're into the point where they're canceling visa applications. You can't get a visa if you apply for one now in Turkey to come to the United States. They've shut that off. Russia now is taking the United States to their own court in the United States, and Vladimir Putin says, let's see how great this court system is, because the United States shut down a consulate in San Francisco. And remember, when you have an embassy or a consulate of a foreign country, that is considered their property. Russia's consulate, Russia's embassies are considered Russian territory. Well, the United States shut those down, and Russia is saying, you're causing problems here. You're causing major problems. And of course, everybody's saying, well, what is Turkey's plans? What is Turkey's plans? Then President Trump also, recently, it comes out more and more is coming out why the Secretary of State referred to President Trump as a moron. Well, it's coming out that he actually said that he wants 10 times our nuclear arsenal we have right now. They told him they had about 4,000. He wants closer to 40,000. With 4,000, you could annihilate every man, woman, and child on the face of this earth. It's insanity to want more, but it's more about being the bigger bully. Well, today, this come out right before services, and I want to read you this real quick. This is on RT, and it says, U.S. stance on nuclear deal would lead to global chaos, the Iranian parliament speaker says. Now remember, President Trump says we're pulling out of this agreement with Iran. Well, this is from Iran. This is what they're saying, and also Russia speaking with this. It says U.S. policies toward the 2015 nuclear deal and its sanctions against Moscow and Tehran will spread chaos in the international community, the Speaker of Iran's parliament said. It seems like the U.S. has started some action which will eventually lead to disorder on the whole world arena. An example to that is the sanctions they imposed on Iran and Russia, as well as the measures they began to take in light of the nuclear agreement signing with Iran. All this is being spoken of by the Speaker of the House for the Iranian Parliament. His name is Larijani. Over the past months, the Americans have repeatedly violated the nuclear agreement. Larijani said he was surprised to hear U.S. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson openly say the administration revises old agreements. The new administration revised old agreements. He was very clear. When you, Iran, negotiated, you should have known that the governments change and that agreements may change as well. Larijani goes on to say, but then you can't reach any agreements at all. This is what Pastor said from the beginning. One government makes an agreement, the next government comes in and nullifies the agreement. There's no honesty. There's no solution to this changing. And why are all these countries realigning themselves? To avoid sanctions. If you get outside the U.S. dollar is really where the sanctions are implied. You start dealing in the yuan, the ruble, you start dealing in other currencies, the United States cannot sanction you, and that's what they're doing. They're realigning themselves to escape the power of this. You cannot buy, sell, nor trade. Keep in mind and watch very closely, and remember all the words Yisrayl Hawkins has brought for many years, because the end is very near. If we could please play the news.
Pay close attention. What you're about to see is Bible prophecy being fulfilled.
Welcome to another edition of YPN News, bringing you news as it relates to Bible prophecy and foretold by Yisrayl Hawkins. Well, feeding an entire island might seem like a feat, but there are those who are pushing to get that accomplished. Saudi Arabian leaders making visits to China, and is the U.S. president really ready and willing to use nuclear weapons? Well, this world is getting scarier by the day, and these are just a few of the events taking place supporting Bible prophecy. But first, let's take a look at a non-profit organization called Chefs for Puerto Rico, who brought relief in the form of food to the victims of Hurricane Harvey in Houston, and is once again doing the same to the victims in Puerto Rico after Hurricane Irma. Well, Chef Andres and his team are working very hard to prepare literally hundreds of pounds of food for those hurricane victims, from soups to chicken and rice dishes and other well-accepted meals as well.
On one particular day, the team was making over 10,000 meals, in addition to 10,000 sandwiches, burgers, hot dogs, bread, and fruit. Chef Andres promised to deliver even more meals to different areas devastated by the hurricane, to the tune of 50,000 meals, as he planned to expand his operation. When they arrived on the island, they started out by making only about 1,500 meals, but by the end of the week, they were making over 25,000 meals. So quite a jump.
Yeah, that's a rapid progression here. Volunteers started showing up concerned only with helping to prepare meals. As word got out, orders started coming in for more meals. Andre said that even more people from the private sector came and helped with the operation, providing relief even quicker than the federal government, adding, he said that we need to rely less on the government and rely more on the private sector to take care of the needs of the people, because they are here and they see what's needed better than the federal government can.
When Mr. Andres was spoken to later about the progress of the operation, he said that him and the team is currently producing 50,000 hot meals a day, and by the end of the following week, they were planning on providing over 100,000 hot meals a day, with 3 kitchens spread about the island working as one unit. And that's a lot, even with 3 kitchens, 100,000 meals.
That isn't. Tremendous number. He also added, Jeff, that the people of Puerto Rico can supply food for themselves, and businesses should work together, including catering companies and restaurants, to get much needed food to the people. Again, like he reiterated, not relying so much on the government, but using the resources that they already have there in Puerto Rico. He said this would in turn help not just during the time of disaster, but in the future to activate the local economy, putting young men and women to work instead of just sitting at home.
Mr. Andres said in an interview that all food for the victims should be produced, cooked, and delivered by the people of Puerto Rico for the people of Puerto Rico, and in doing so, they will start to activate the local economy. He said, "We can't wait for 60 days to activate the economy. The economy should be activated as we are bringing hope and food and help to people." He noted that if we don't take care of the people, then the people will want to leave, and this will be like a refugee crisis if we don't take care of our people and keep resources within Puerto Rico.
And finally, Jeff, Andre said that the goal was to make sure that they got to that 100,000 plus hot meals a day quicker now than later, because he said he didn't want people going home thinking that they, referring to the Chefs for Puerto Rico organization, didn't take care of them. Well, like we said earlier, Saudi Arabia recently made a unprecedented trip to Russia to meet with Vladimir Putin, the president there. They're making some other rounds to some superpowers, some major economic players in the world market. We have our field correspondent Larry McGee, who has some updates for us regarding that. Where is Saudi Arabia trying to strengthen its relations now?
Probably the largest competitor vying for control of the current global system other than the U.S. is Russia. Close behind Russia is China. And in addition to current efforts aimed at establishing stronger ties with Moscow, Saudi Arabia is also now working to strengthen relations with Beijing. China's interests reportedly lie in recruiting the Saudis into its efforts to revive its Silk Road era of trade dominance and prosperity, while Riyadh is said to be seeking ways to diversify its revenue away from oil exports, its dependence on which is currently calculated at around 70%. The two nations are reported to have signed 14 deals to date, and what is being called a strategic alliance that will be a key factor, it is believed, in determining the future of Saudi Arabia. Analysts have also been quick to note that the powwow has come at a time when relations between the oil titan and the U.S. are believed to be weakening, a problem which many are attributing to the actions and ideas of President Trump. The idea of de-escalation zones to address the bloodshed in Syria have been adopted and is being pushed by Russia, Turkey, and Iran. Turkey has taken a leading role, with its president recently making public statements that it will not allow a corridor of terror to develop along its border with Syria. Though Damascus and Ankara have been at odds in times past, Syria has not voiced opposition to recent Turkish anti-terror operations inside the country, a fact which observers believe is an indication that Damascus is open to the idea of cooperation. The official statement released by Syria is that this will be a test for Turkey. The de-escalation zones agreed upon by all three nations are areas that they have committed to keep free of fighting and to allow aid into. The hope is that the zones will also enhance trust on all sides of the conflict. A sticking point, however, is Idlib in Syria, which is close to an area where aid is designated to be delivered, but is under the control of a collection of militia groups, which includes the Syrian branch of Al-Qaeda. The area also borders with Turkey, so Ankara is now faced with the challenge of how to proceed. Meanwhile, relations between Turkey and the U.S. have continued to be fraught with challenges, the latest issue being the arrest of an American-Turkish embassy worker who was accused of having ties to terrorism. In retaliation, the U.S. ambassador to Turkey announced a suspension on visas to Turkey. The next move in the tit-for-tat was Turkey similarly suspending visas for any Americans. The hostility between the two wayward allies is reportedly rooted in America's affiliation with the man associated with the movement whom it believes was a part of the failed coup attempt which occurred in the country last summer. Turkey further suspects U.S. involvement in the attempt due to its refusal to extradite the movement's leader, who was in the U.S., back to Turkey. There has been a great deal of tension and back and forth between the two nations, with neither party being willing to de-escalate the conflict and back down. The largest concern for observers is that amid all the hostility and both sides seeking to strike back, no thought is being given to the thousands of people who are being affected. For IPN News, I'm Larry McGee. Katan Jeff, back to you.
Katan, going back to Larry's first article, it's interesting that Saudi Arabia now wants to make connections with Russia, now China. It seems like the sides, the alliances are starting to form.
Yeah, and that's two countries that the United States has had a few run-ins with in the past, so we'll see how that plays out.
Well, Turkey is taking a more direct involvement in the Syrian war as it launches what it called a serious military operation along its border with Syria. During the talks in Astana this past May, Russia, Iran, and Turkey set aside their differences and signed a deal which established 4 de-escalation zones throughout Syria. Now, the largest zone being the entire province of Idlib. The others are on the outskirts of the capital Damascus, Daraa on the border with Jordan, and northern parts of Homs.
While not involved in the fighting themselves, Turkey is providing logistical and intelligence support to the Free Syrian Army, who moved into the northwestern province of Idlib this past week. Their goal is to measure security in the region, which has suffered from some of the most violent conflicts during the Syrian civil war. The enemy controlling much of the area is known as Fatah al-Sham, an alliance of factions linked to al-Qaeda fighters.
In a news briefing, Turkish President Erdogan gave details about the mission. He told reporters, "We have opened up a space in our region with Operation Euphrates Shield. And now we are making efforts to take a step forward by maintaining security in Idlib. There is a serious operation in Idlib, and it will continue because we have our brothers there who came to Idlib fleeing violence in Aleppo."
The president continued with notable concern. "We can't tell them whatever happens, happens. You can either die or survive. Well, we have to extend our hand to our brothers. Now, this step has been taken and it's underway."
The opposition has thousands of fighters and is vowing to fight to the death. So, of course, the new campaign is causing concern for civilians living in Idlib. The Turkish army plans to operate within the city, while the Russian army will be just outside the province. Now, it is uncertain just how long it will take to secure the area or at what cost to humanity.
While Russia's relationship with Turkey has improved, it seems to be continuing on a downward spiral with the United States. Now, Russians are demanding their rights of ownership be respected by the United States. During a recent phone call between Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and Secretary of State Rex Tillerson, the topic of Russia's diplomatic property came up.
The foreign minister told Secretary Tillerson that the U.S. had illegally seized the properties owned by Russia after the Russian consulate in San Francisco was closed down. President Obama indeed did order the seizure of 2 diplomatic compounds back in December of 2016. 35 Russian diplomats were also expelled. All of this was in response to Russia's alleged interference in the 2016 U.S. presidential election.
Now, Lavrov is demanding the properties be returned or consequences will follow. Amid the discussion, the two talked about the Syrian and Korean situations. Russia feels the use of dialogue is necessary to resolve tensions in both countries. In ending the conversation, both supported the need to continue consulting the other regarding their own tensions and diplomatic shutdowns to work it out.
However, shortly after the conversation, a statement was issued by the Russian Foreign Ministry which said Russia reserves the right to undertake legal action and retaliatory measures.
Those are like fighting words. Well, concerns over how the U.S. is handling foreign affairs continues to grow as the situation between President Trump and Kim Jong-un only gets hotter. Not to mention how President Trump's cabinet views him.
MSNBC's Morning Joe program brought out how, before his election, a foreign policy expert tried to advise Donald Trump on international affairs, but 3 times during the 1-hour meeting, it was said that Trump asked, if we have them, of course he was referring to nuclear weapons, if we have them, why can't we use them? That was reported in August of 2016, almost like not understanding just how powerful a nuclear weapon is.
Right. Recently, YPN shared news how President Trump and Secretary of State Rex Tillerson seems to be at odds, and in the wake of Tillerson calling the president a moron, it would leave everyone wondering why. But new light has been shed on events which occurred not too long before the secretary made those comments.
Prior to Tillerson's name-calling incident, President Trump had a meeting with his national security team that rattled some of his top officials. In the meeting, the president called for a huge increase in nuclear weapons.
3 officials present at the July 20th meeting shared with NBC News the president expressed the desire to expand the U.S. nuclear arsenal about 10 times greater than it is right now. Currently, the U.S. has 4,000 warheads, 4,000 nuclear warheads, and at the height of the nuclear arms race back in the 60s, the government had around 32,000 nuclear warheads. Now, as was mentioned before, not as powerful as what we have now, but still a great number nonetheless.
Well, if Trump's suggestions were followed, it would not only go against decades of nuclear doctrine, but also violate a number of nuclear arms control treaties. But the United States is not planning to change the size of its nuclear weapons arsenal at this point.
Since his candidacy, Trump has not consistently stated his position on nuclear weapons, sometimes inferring he was against the spread of such weapons, and then at other times seeming to be okay with. Well, shortly after his inauguration, Mr. Trump tweeted, "The United States must greatly strengthen and expand its nuclear capability until such time as the world comes to its sense regarding nukes."
And still there is ever-increasing tensions with North Korea over its nuclear program. Just overnight, there came a show of force when U.S. bombers flew near the Sea of Japan along with Japanese and South Korean jets. Now, President Trump plans to meet with his national security team again this week to discuss the crisis, while Defense Secretary Mattis has been stressing the use of diplomacy, also warns all options are on the table and at the president's disposal.
Wow.
Well, all options might be on the table, but only one will bring about peace, the peaceful solution. The others, which are fueled by retaliation, hatred, and fear, will only bring about the near destruction of all life on the face of this earth. Although our world leaders might be ready to push the buttons to release the nuclear wars, the only buttons you should push are the ones that will get you in contact with the House of Yahweh and Yisrayl Hawkins. We'll do so today so you can find your protection from this prophesied nuclear destruction. And when you do, don't forget to request your free copy of the Prophetic Word magazine and monthly newsletter. Here's how.
To contact the House of Yahweh, you can write them at The House of Yahweh, P.O. Box 2498, Abilene, Texas 79604. You can also call them at 1-800-613-9494 or visit them on any of their websites by going to www.yahweh.com, www.yisraelhawkins.com, or www.yahwehsbranch.com. You can also visit our website by going to www.ypnnews.com. You can also email the House of Yahweh at info@yahweh.com. And all other calls outside the United States, please call the number on your screen. And of course, don't forget the free online study programs to the Holy Scriptures, the Yisrael Says, and the Ask Yisrael programs. You can find them by going to www.yisraelsays.com and www.askyisrael.com.
Well, don't go anywhere. Up next, the only man who's pushing for the option of peace, Yisrayl Hawkins. From all of us here at YPN News, I'm Jeffrey Heimerman.
And I'm Katan Alexander.
Thanks for watching.
If everyone would please stand. Well, as the House of Yahweh said, you have got to be ready to appear before the one sent. And at this time, I'd like to present to you the greatest teacher in the world, the great Kahan Yisrayl Abel Hawkins.
Shalom, everyone! Wow. Everyone is still here. You see that, Yahweh? Hey, Yahweh. Well, those are great, aren't they? Tree's about to fall. You may be seated. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. As you can see, the nuclear wars are right upon us here. They're very, very close. Could go off at any time now. Only Yahweh's holding them back, that's for sure. The great day of the feast. This is the greatest day of the feast, 10/13. I think you got that number today. I hope so. I didn't get to watch anything. I was busy with working out details. The cookbook, I think we got that arranged to give out this afternoon. Is that right? Okay. Actually, there's been a motive behind this cookbook all along. When I first heard the idea, I said, you know, this might... I've always been concerned about feeding, finding food, especially after the nuclear burning, and feeding that many people. It's not an easy task, but knowledge is being developed, of course, and it's looking like it is possible. I know it's possible. I know Yahweh is going to make it possible, but we are gathering a great deal of knowledge on how to do these things. I don't know if you saw the famous cook from New York, I think, that's in Puerto Rico now, and he's feeding the people who work in the hospitals. I guess that's as far-reaching as he's gotten, but surely there's others taking tips from him and doing the same thing for the people, hopefully. Now, of course, that's their business. The fires in California, that's their business. I was reading an article this morning where this was set up, these fires, where it looked like there was getting a lot of rain and the blessings was pouring in. And of course, this created undergrowth. Then it created some bugs that got in the barks, created a habitat in the barks that getting all this rain at one time, the floods, and the bark became kindling for these fires that's going on now. Perfect kindling, they said, to even one spark could set this on fire. So they've turned all their blessings into curses. The bread sack this morning, I've got to read you that. The heavens must be filled with great joy. Yes, they are. Yahweh himself and Yahshua are rejoicing with the house of Yahweh. Rejoice in Yahweh. Again, I say rejoice. Philippians 4:4. I thought that was very fitting for this feast because the rejoicing is something that Yahweh tells you you can do, and of course you will do. And we're rejoicing. This has been a kind of a fun thing and a lot of joy for a lot of people who are involved in the work of this cookbook. But we're hoping that this cookbook will bring forth leaders who will teach others to lead in cooking, but also in raising food. If we have the land, we can raise the food. And the big gathering, I've harped on this some, this big gathering that is taking place right now, that we're involved in a time when Revelations 6 is being fulfilled. Revelation 6, taking peace from the earth, it tells who will. Yada is given charge over the whole world. That's in Genesis 49, 10, and 11. If you're not familiar with that, we have many, many sermons on that. The first verse of that chapter says, in the last days. Micah 4 verse 1 says, in the last days I will establish my house. Yada rules clear up until the very end when the explosions, the great burning takes place, and that wipes out the sin and the sinners, and at least for 1,000 years. Then that's where our big gathering takes place, bringing back Yaakov to Yahweh. That's our job. Right now we're facing World War III. North Korea claims Trump has lit the wick of war, threatening hail of fire. Now this is, of course, North Korea is making this threat and says words won't do anymore. We need to settle the final score only with hail of fire, not words. So they're determined on both sides, looks like, to bring this war. I won't read this today, but I do want you to learn about the canon law that the Catholic Church, this is Yada now. Keep in mind, the Catholic Church that sits on 7 hills is Yada. Genesis 49, 1, 10, and 11. Yada, Pope Francis, talks about the canon law, and they're celebrating the 100th anniversary of that canon law. The canon law, as I'll show you, I can't do it tomorrow. Tomorrow's filled. but I will bring it, the canon law that they follow. It gives that's the first beast, and took all the authority to do anything they wanted to take. Oh, the numbers, I've got to bring these out first, or you won't understand it. Take by any means. And what you don't want to buy, just take by whatever means you need to. That's the canon law for the Catholic Church. And that's what they've done since days of Cain, and then Nimrod. Keep in mind that the Egyptians, they were Hamitic, come from Ham. They had an invasion of Semitics. That's the Hebrew-speaking people that Yahweh sent down there to be trained, actually fully trained by the Coptic Catholic religion. It's a great plan. And since they rejected Yahweh's law, the great sword that turns in 4 directions, turning, flaming, who turns out to be the quartet, if you get all of this in your mind and start trying to remember everything I bring, you'll be able to put all this together. But that great flaming sword will only be taken out with a great burning, with the great burning that is going to take place. U.S. stance on nuclear deal will lead to global chaos, says the Iranians now. We have buried many like Trump, they say. We have buried many like Trump. Iranian general warns Tehran knows how to fight against the U.S. So you can see that each one's calling the other's bluff. Then the canon law, it affects every Catholic, whether they know it or not. They're living by the canon law. They're not living by the laws of Yahweh, the laws of righteousness. Yeshua said, seek first Yahweh's kingdom and his righteousness. That's the Savior's word. The canon law says do away with the righteousness of Yahweh. That was the earlier church, they said, that did that. The old church that did that. Follow the canon law. The righteousness, the apostle says, is like filthy rags. Well, of course, the nuclear burning that will take place, you need to have this in your mind. The nuclear burning that will take place, that will get rid of sin, it actually started in 1934. Now, to bring this to light, we have the tools that was used in 1934. We have, if you know anything about farming instruments now, automobiles. This right here was how the doctor came to our house. We got one displayed down there at the peaceful scene. I hope you noticed it, and on the back, front, and sides, or back and sides, we have a sign that says Family Doctor. He traveled from town. The people would normally jump on a horse and go and tell the doctor, my mother's having a baby, we need you there. By the time he'd get there, the baby would be delivered and everything taken care of. That's the way it was in my family. The doctor never saw my mother. Praise Yahweh. How's your wife, Ode? Oh, she's okay. How's the baby? Everything's well. Okay, well, when you get a name, we'll bring it to us, and we'll give you a birth certificate. Well, of course, in this time period now of nuclear war, and it's going to be in our time, in our generation, brethren, You know, it's very close. It started in 1934. The last of these buggies right here was made in 1934. 1934. They were made from 1889. This particular buggy, if my memory holds well, 1989 to 1934. After that, they started going to automobiles due to the knowledge increase that started in 1934 that was prophesied. Prophesied. Yahweh tells everything in advance. Everything. He's the only being in the universe that can do this. This is our job to bring that to the world, to make them understand this, and let them know they can trust Yahweh. Now this, brethren, is what's going to turn the world around. It's going to turn Yada even, Yaakov, that the tribes that are alive. And that be turning over to Isaiah 44, because Daniel, in the same time period where he saw the knowledge increase, the greatest time of trouble ever, the increase in knowledge that Yahweh said would come, is Daniel 12, verse 4. He also saw the two witnesses on a future day teaching, and Yahweh actually allowed him to speak to one of the witnesses on that day. That day. Well, the knowledge increase came at the same time my birth, 1934, and that's what history says. A computer started in 1934. History also shows that the nuclear bomb that will bring forth the burning, started in 1934. Now there's three witnesses there that bring forth the prophecies that was written by Daniel, and the number of the year that Daniel wrote this, you really need to look those numbers up. Now we're going to bring them, but you need to study them for yourselves. Even a Strong's Concordance, if you'll just look in a Strong's Concordance and see the year number that he gave there and study them out, you'll find me, the branch, which is also with Yeshua, Zechariah 6, with Yeshua, doing this job of gathering this great gathering together and showing them how to rejoice in righteousness. In Isaiah 44, Isaiah 44, we see these two witnesses here, and the great job they have. It's very clear what our job is. It's simple and clear and given by Isaiah, but it's also given in other places. And of course, in the last days, when the Yahweh's house would be established by the branch. By the branch. It tells you who's going to establish it. There's no other house of Yahweh on earth. No other. We have exclusive rights, complete rights to the name, the house of Yahweh, house of Yahweh, the house of Yahweh. Yahweh saw to it that we did. Well, here he talks about one of the witnesses in Isaiah 43:28 being given to the curse. And of course that left it on only one witness after that. But he did a great work in Israel, and of course come back, and he and I worked together for a while, and then before he was given to this curse, I think he was assassinated. That's my firm belief, because they couldn't find anything that killed him. That's strange. Yet here, O Yaakov, that's while both of us were still alive. Hear, O Yaakov, my servant, and Yisrayl, whom I have chosen. This is what Yahweh says, who made you and formed you Now that word formed now, you need to look up the letters on that. There's much work you could do here in your own studies. If you just study this word formed, study it out. Formed you from the womb, who will help you. Do not be afraid. Yahweh is helping us. When he says you, he's not just speaking to me. He's speaking to the whole house of Yahweh. In the last days, I will establish my house. So put it in place in your mind. These prophecies are for us. There's no way I could do this alone. It's the whole group, the house of Yahweh, who will help you. Do not be afraid, Yaakov, my servant, or Yisrayl, beloved Israel, whom I have appointed. For I will pour water upon him who is thirsty. Speaking of course, the water of life. I'll pour it on those who actually thirst for it, as floods upon the dry ground. It won't be lacking. I will pour out my spirit, the laws of Yahweh. Yalkanon 6:63. Write that down and check me out. This is the spirit of Yahweh. The flesh is worthless without the spirit of Yahweh. The spirit of Yahweh, the words I speak, Yeshua said, the laws that I speak, that word is debar, meaning laws. The laws I speak, they are spirit and they are life, eternal, that he pours out from the house. Pour out my spirit upon your seed. That's you, brethren. See how we're intertwined together here? And my blessings upon your offspring. He says that in other places too. Look on down to verse 4. They will spring up among the grass as willows by the water's courses. By where this water of life is poured, they will spring up. One will say, I belong to Yahweh. Here's the two witnesses now and how they got their names. I belong to Yahweh, and the same will call himself by the name Yaakov. I've explained this in detail many, many times, so get the tapes. The other will subscribe with his hand, that's me, and write, I belong to Yahweh, and surname himself with the name Yisrael. This is what Yahweh, the King of Israel and Redeemer. Remember that word Redeemer. It plays a great part in the whole house of Yahweh. Yahweh of hosts says, I am the first, I am the last, and except for me there is no source of power. The gods have no power. No, they were not with Yahweh when he created man or the earth. And who, as the great Yehuda brought out today, correcting a scripture for me, because I hope to use that in this sermon before my time is up. Who as I will foretell and set it in order for me? No one can foretell the future, no human being. Only Yahweh can do that. But he's saying he's going to give to his two witnesses the power to foretell the future. Foretell means prophesy. Since I appointed the ancient people and the things which are coming, I appointed the things which are coming. I prophesied, I foretold them in advance. No one can do that. You'll be able to one day, when you get your subconscious mind and you train for a few thousand years, you'll be able to see a person's actions, and he'll hear a voice behind him saying, this is the way, walk you in it. That's what this same book Isaiah said. That's the power you're going to be given while you're enjoying abundant living with Yahweh and Yeshua, the whole kingdoms that you're going to be put over. Yes, you'll be able to do that job and many thousands of others at the same time. It won't be like you're glued to a telephone like I am. and the things which are coming, Yahweh has foretold them. And he says, and will come, let them foretell them. He has to give this to a person. You can't prophesy on your own. You can't understand prophecies on your own. A great example of that was with one of the disciples when he joined a buggy like this one right here with a person sitting in it reading one of the manuscripts. And he said, King James Version, understandest thou what thou readest? He said, how can I? How can I? You've got to have someone explain it to you, someone who is sent. The man knew that. You can't just go any place in Abilene. You can go to the Lords of Abilene, but they will screw your mind up big time. They won't dare tell you the truth. They won't dare give you the scriptures. They're like the Catholic Church. They have their own canon law that they go by. They didn't know that the Vatican designed it for them. Okay, verse 8, do not fear, nor be afraid. Have I not told you from that time, and have declared you are my witnesses? You're the ones that's going to tell this. From the beginning, he told you this. The beginning. Genesis 49. Genesis 49. Is there a source of power except me? Now, the world don't realize this, brother, and you're the only ones that's got this knowledge right here. The world's not teaching this. They're teaching the God worship. Follow the evil like the gods. Be evil like the gods, as Genesis 3 verse 5 tells you. Obey Satan. Obey Satan. Her son was Cain. But he's my son. But he's my son, Yahweh. Yeah, he is. He was. He was Eve's son. Is he better than your son? No. Is he better than your daughter? Come on, wake up now. Yahweh is telling you some things here. You've got to keep these things in your mind. You are the witnesses for Yahweh. You can't be the witnesses for Satan and the witnesses of Yahweh at the same time. Is there a source of power except Yahweh? The answer is no. Absolutely not. Yeshua don't even have it at this time. And he's been with Yahweh over 2,000 years now. You are my witnesses. Is there a source of power except me? Truly there is no other rock, I know not any. All who make themselves like gods, verse 9. Look at verse 10. Who has framed a god or cast a graven image without a prophet? You know, they talk about the Catholics. They have their house full of these trinkets that the Catholic Church has probably millions of these, what they call tourist traps. They have a bunch of them in Israel, and you stop there and everybody buys a remembrance, something to remember this trip to Israel or this trip to Bethlehem. You get out of the car, they got these little trinkets, or off of the bus at these sites, and they got these little trinkets, carrying them in a thing on their shoulders. This is all paid for by the shop, and they give these people, they hire people to go out and get around the crowd as they come off the bus so they can buy a statue of Jesus, of Mary. That's what they say of the Apostle Kepha, or that they give you a dirty name. And so they make them for profit. It's not like they trust in these goofy things. You know, they know there's no power in this at all. But there's a lot of money in it. And Yahweh foretells you a prophecy right there, telling you they don't make these for any glory to Yahweh or something that will give you power. You could have your house full of them, and the fires in California would wipe them out. If they're on a mountain in California, they'll get wiped out. No power. There is no power other than Yahweh. Let's see, verse 10. Look at verse 21 now. Remember, he says, remember these lessons. Remember these lessons, O Jacob and Israel, the witnesses of Yahweh, as you just read, the two witnesses. For you are servants. You are servants. I made you a servant to me, O Israel. You will not be forgotten by me. He says he's going to stand by us through this whole thing. Right now, he says he's encamped about his house. You'd be wiped out, brethren, if there wasn't. We're the most I am. You are too. If you belong to the house of Yahweh, and they know it, you're the most hated people on the face of the earth. I'm a jailbird. My brother was a jailbird, Yeshua Messiah. He calls us brothers, you know. He was a jailbird. The man that wrote, that copied down for Yeshua, Yalkanan, did it while he was a jailbird. In fact, I guess that's where he died, was in jail. But his collections was collected for you, his writings, and actually put with the book of Yahweh. This shows the power of Yahweh through this whole thing. He protected his prophecies. He protected every one of them, put them together, and in 1987, he gave them to his house. With his name, whom we're the only ones on earth that reverences that name. He says, I have blotted out like a thick cloud your transgressions, and like a cloud your sins. Turn to me, for I have redeemed you. Let me see where to go here. Let's read on. Sing, O heavens. Rejoice, heavens, over this. And they are. They're looking forward to seeing the sons of Yahweh, the brothers and sisters of Yeshua. For Yahweh has done it. Shout, you lower parts of the earth. Break forth in singing, you mountains, O forest, and every tree in it. For Yahweh has redeemed Jacob. That's our job right here. That's what we're doing, and that's what this means right here, as I'll show you. And glorified himself through Yisrael. This is what Yahweh, your Redeemer, he who formed you from the womb. Remember, verse 2. I formed you from the womb, the two brothers of the same womb. This is what Yahweh, your Redeemer, he who formed you from the womb, says. I am Yahweh who makes all things, who stretched out the heavens. I alone stretched out the heavens, who spread out. David brought that, Yehuda. The correct translation, here it is, 24. This is what Yahweh, your Redeemer, he who formed you from the womb, says, I am Yahweh who makes all things, who stretched out the heavens alone, who spread out the earth by myself. Who was with me when I did this? The King James Version says, not the New King James, but the King James, "Thus says Yahweh, thy Redeemer, and he that formed thee from the womb, I am Yahweh that maketh all things, and stretcheth forth the heavens alone." I stretch forth the heavens alone. That speaketh abroad, that spreadeth abroad the earth by myself. That's the King James Version. It had it right. The Amplified Bible got it right. "Thus says Yahweh, your Redeemer, and he who formed you from the womb, I am Yahweh who made all things, who alone stretched out the heavens, who spread out the earth by myself." The commentators say, by myself. 13 manuscripts says the same thing. 6 ancient confirm this reading, by myself. So they know it was a mistranslation, a false translation. That is, now verse 25, I am the one who frustrates the signs of the false prophets, who makes fools of diviners. Remember the word Vatican, it means the divining serpent. I make fools of the diviners. That is, I show that they are foolish, who turns wise men backward and makes their knowledge nonsense. I am the one who carries out the word of his servant and fulfills the plan of his messenger. I'm the one that does this, he says. In Isaiah 45, he continues on with your job. Isaiah 45, look at verse 6 first. Isaiah 45, verse 6. So that they may know from the rising of the sun to the place of its setting that there is none beside me. You know, we're the only ones saying that, brethren. We're the only ones taking this message. No one else on earth is taking this message. They're all God worshipers. I am Yahweh, and there is no other. That was 6. Look at verse 14. Verse 14. This is what Yahweh says. The labor of Egypt, the merchandise of Ethiopia, and of the Sabeans, men of stature, will come over to you, and they will be yours. They will come after you in chains. They will come over. They will fall down to you, and they will make supplication to you, saying, surely Yahweh is in you, and there is none else. They're going to recognize the source of power. These people. Now, the wording here in the words that he gives you is something similar to Babylon. And I intended to get up to that place today, but I won't. I'm out of time. But it's like in Genesis 10, if I can explain it quickly, in Genesis, the 10th chapter, where it's talking about Cush and who fathered the system, the religious system. It was a religious system, but it was a system of get a king, form a village, make it big, get you a king who will start a police force, who will take captive and bring to your city that will make it grow faster, who will take tribute from cities that you want left, And if you'll read that chapter, it was about Babylon. It gives some words there and said, this is Babylon. In the prophecies I'm about to bring you, as this is important, you remember this, because it speaks of Damascus. Acts speaks of Babylon. One of the prophets spoke the same words, but said Damascus. Well, of course, Babylon was a territory. It still is. It's changed, of course, and taken in different names. Syria took in all of Syria. Babylon did. If you notice in Genesis 10, this teaching, this system of this Nimrod system, it quickly spread. It quickly spread throughout all these places, these cities. So each one formed a king and a god to worship. And of course they formed their own language. They separated, formed their own languages, and they spread out through the earth like this. Each one, and when Samuel, Yada's men came to Samuel and said, we want a king like all other nations. That's what he is speaking of. We want this Nimrod system to follow it. So Samuel let them go back into the Coptic Catholic religion. That's what it was. Coptic Catholic from Ham. And of course, the mixture then from others who came to Egypt following Ham. But Ham was the first to settle Egypt. But the Babylon, this Babylon, remember this information, or you won't understand what I'm going to bring you tomorrow. This information is Babylon was a huge territory, and it spread out to all of those cities in Babylon quickly spread to all of those cities. The way the King James Version has it, well, Nimrod was a person, or that's the way the Christians teach it. Nimrod was a person, and he went to building all these cities. Well, what it was impossible. But the teaching spread throughout all of these areas. Each one said, hey, this is a great idea. We can take in captives, make our cities grow. We'll build a tower, a high tower, which they neglected later and went to other ways. But they did this to stay together, keep the people bound together with the king, and get big enough to where no one would dare to attack us. That's the story of Nimrod in a nutshell there. But my time is up, but not totally. And no, I'm not going to retire until about 10:30 or 11. I'm only going to do that for about 6 hours. The afternoon service is going to be great, really great. Don't miss it. And then the service tomorrow, we got a Sabbath that begins when this Sabbath ends. We got a weekly Sabbath that starts at the same time, so we're going to rejoice right through it too. And tomorrow's going to be the best day too, a great day too. This today, most anything could take place. I feel like sometimes I get so excited and rejoicing. I feel like I'm going to raise up and fly around here. All of you are going to follow me. That probably won't take place, but it could. But be prepared, okay? Yahweh bless you, and I'll turn the services back to the next leader. I love you.